Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's finally time for Game of the Year Madness 2024. We did this at the end of last year for 2023, and it was a lot of fun. We had a lot of people participating in it. I think when it was all said and done, we had a couple million votes in total for the entire bracket, and we did end up having a winner for the Game of the Year, which was technically then voted on by just the audience, just all the gamers out there, and it ended up being The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. It went up against Baldur's Gate 3. We figured the 1 and 2 seed would run all the way through their sides of the brackets, and they did. And then at the end, it was like a 55-45 split. So even then, overall, it was still pretty close. And there were some matches all the way throughout that were very close. So it was a lot of fun. And this year, I think, is going to be even better because there are many good games this year, right? And there's nothing I think that's completely run away from the other in terms of like review scores or notoriety. And I think there are some actually that are technically lower seed that could definitely overtake many of the higher seeds. So this is going to be fun, and we're going to take a look at that here today. Guys, enjoy the video, like button, subscribe, all that good stuff. Especially want to keep up to date on this because essentially what's going to happen now is we're going to be running the poll question as the matchups throughout. And it's going to be a bit to go through all of them. And this is going to be starting actually tomorrow. So on Tuesday, the poll question will be the first matchup. And in fact, I wanted to take a look at some of the seeding, the matchup, the bracket, everything, which I posted up on Twitter already. But let's take a look at the seeding because I have to explain how we came to the determination of this. And it's always difficult because in order to come up with the seeding, the nomination stuff, the thing that I went on last year and I went on this year was the review scores and the number of reviews. And mostly I used OpenCritic, and then I went to Metacritic sort of to back things up, right? Because there were some where it was like kind of like right on the line in terms of the number of reviews and the review score. And then I used basically Metacritic to verify, which I think came up with a pretty good list of 32. Technically, as long as once you get into the bracket, it really then just comes down to the people voting anyway. So again, just getting in is all that really matters technically. Now, there are some games that I probably got left out that you may be thinking of. There's one in particular, like Mouthwashing, for example. The problem with that is it had like 13 reviews, and while it was reviewed, I think, in a way that would have allowed it to be here, it just didn't have enough reviews. And what I noticed last year is that there were some that got in that had like honestly a handful of reviews because we just went basically by review score, and those got absolutely destroyed in the voting because not enough people were even aware of the game. And there are some that still went through. So I had it as a baseline of 35 reviews, like in terms of OpenCritic, and then also looking at Metacritic to verify. So again, I think there's a few in here that will definitely be people will be made more aware of it. But I mean, you can see the number 1 seed was Astrobot, and then Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, then Metaphor, Balatro, Tekken 8, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Animal Well, Unicorn Overlord, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, Silent Hill 2, that rounds out the top 10. Then Dragon's Dogma 2, Indiana Jones, Neva, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, Frostpunk 2, Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, Legend of Heroes, Trails Through Daybreak, Dragon Quest III HD 2D, Thank Goodness You're Here, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, Helldivers 2, Kinetzugami Path of the Goddess, SteamWorld Heist 2, Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, Crow Country, Stellar Blade, The Plucky Squire, Black Myth Wukong, Space Marine 2, Super Mario Party Jamboree, Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, and then Hellblade 2 actually rounded out the 32 spots. So Hellblade 2 was like right there at the cutoff. But overall, I think this is a pretty good like cast of 32 games here that represents 2024. And one of the reasons I waited so long is because I figured the further I could go into 2024, the better. I feel like I didn't want to go just into January and then still be talking about 2024. I at least wanted to get this started in like the year that this represents. But this allowed me to see where Indiana Jones is going to fall, whereas as we just saw the Game Awards, they just couldn't look at Indiana Jones because it basically came out right up against the show. So in this case, Indiana Jones, I mean, technically it paid off. There is that concern of what if it came out and it just wasn't very good and it missed it, and I just felt like I waited this whole time for nothing, but not the case here. So good news, it was number 12, and again, that covers seeds 1 through 32, which then leads to the matchups. So it is kind of hard to get the entire bracket here on screen because when I zoom all the way out, it's really tough to see all the text. It gets pretty small. But we'll start here with Astrobot. As I said, it matches up number 1 seed versus 32 seed, and then it works all the way down to where it's what, like 16 versus 17, I think. So with that in mind, then we have the number 1 seed Astrobot, for example, versus number 32 Hellblade 2 in the first round. We have Zelda Echoes of Wisdom taking on Trails Through Daybreak. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes taking on Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. Unicorn Overlord taking on Crow Country. Balatro versus Space Marine 2. That's an interesting one. Neva versus Call of Duty Black Ops 6. We have Indiana Jones versus Helldivers 2. Tekken 8 versus Black Myth Wukong. That's a good one, too. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth versus Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. Frostpunk 2 versus Dragon Quest III HD 2D. Silent Hill 2 versus SteamWorld Heist 2. Animal Well versus Stellar Blade. Hey, Animal Well is pretty good. All right, don't discount Animal Well. You never know. Could be an upset there. Although I guess technically Stellar... See, that's what I mean. Stellar Blade is the number 26 seed, whereas Animal Well is the 7th seed. So that's what I mean. You can see some of these lower seeds. Take out some of the higher seeds there. Let's see. We have Metaphor versus Mario Party Jamboree. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown versus Thank Goodness You're... Hey, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. That might be a bit of a dark horse there. That was a good game for people who played it. I think a lot of people enjoyed it. Dragon's Dogma 2 versus Kinitsugami. And then the last matchup there is Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth versus the Plucky Squire. Now, I'll attempt to fit the entire bracket here, and well, the next, technically then 16 days, is going to be voting on these different matchups to go through that first round. And then after that's concluded, we'll circle back. I believe we'll kind of talk about it on the podcast as we can, if it lines up. Otherwise, I'll just basically make a video going over what happened, some of the results, what the new matchups are, and then it will just continue on from there. Again, much like last year where we did our first one and kind of got an idea as to how it all works. But it was a lot of fun. It was just something to vote for and just see what the community, just in general, ends up voting as Game of the Year. And I'm trying to think of what I would put my favorite as. Astrobot, it just won Game of the Year at the Game Awards, so it has momentum in general as people may be looking at it as, oh, that's Game of the Year. But then I also look at something like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as very popular, Metaphor, Balatro, those are popular games online. But then I think of something like Black Myth Wukong, which just has a lot of like community support. So even though that's technically the 28th seed, it wouldn't shock me if that ended up in the semifinals minimum. Like, that's one that could go pretty far, I think. So it's one of the reasons I'm very interested to see how this bracket this year in particular shakes out. But as I mentioned, we're gonna start this up tomorrow, so you're gonna see the polls and stuff going up here, and we'll see how all this works out. Every news wave, though, I'll basically be checking to see what the results are and talking about them at the end of the show for the poll question. So even if you're not necessarily following the bracket, technically you'll be following along if you watch Newswave and you end up in the poll section for that episode. But let me know what you guys think about this down below with the matchups. Which game do you think is going to take it all? Which game do you hope gets a bunch of wins under its belt and goes further into the bracket? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.